This is Cutting Down the Nets, typically your daily college basketball gambling show, but for one night only. We're talking just wins and losses, not point spreads necessarily. We're looking at the 2022 NCAA tournament bracket. We're talking strategy and finding leverage spots. So, who am I? If you haven't seen this before, I publicly bet on 900 college basketball games this year, 155.4%. You can kind of see the monthly results there. This is not picking wins and losses. This is actually choosing games against the point spread, which I assure you is very, very difficult. So when we talk tournament strategy, I'm going to use ESPN. I'm doing this for one major reason. You do not need to pick a perfect bracket to win your pool. You do not need to pick a perfect bracket to win ESPN's pool. You just have to beat the field. The easiest way to beat the field is find leverage over the field. If there are 100 people in your office bracket and 40% pick Gonzaga to win the national championship, that means you can eliminate 40 people if just Gonzaga loses any game along the way, including the championship, and that is certainly leverage over the field. So we'll kind of go matchup by matchup, but I will be highlighting ones where I think are potential for you. So basically, how I would find leverage is the field, so everyone entering these contests, overestimates the probability of a team that's better winning. Like, for instance, UConn, 80% think UConn win that game. UConn likely wins that game, but that point spread is around 7 points, and I actually have it a little less than that when projecting that game out. So if a game's going to be within 5, 6, 7 points, to say the other team has an 80% chance of winning is a bit too high. Now, I don't know if this is the particular spot I attack, but there certainly are some spots in this bracket that I would attack. And I'll kind of give you those leverage spots round by round that I like. And yeah, I think we'll find some opportunities to gain some leverage on the field and hopefully excel in your pool. If your goal is to finish in the top 20%, yeah, you could do something like this where you have Gonzaga winning, put mostly ones and twos in your final four. Don't really pick an upset in the first round or the second round. But if you want to win, you're going to need to find leverage on your opponents. So let's get into it. We'll start with the West region here. While Georgia State is one of the best 16 seeds I've seen since probably Penn a few years ago, they should probably be a 14, maybe a 15. Certainly not ideal to match up with Gonzaga. Had they been a different seed and matched up with like Duke or even Purdue, I think there was some opportunities there, but not in this spot. Boise State and Memphis. I also have Memphis favored by about 5, although the point spread's only like 2.5. So the field may be slightly overconfident there, but I am in line with that. I mentioned UConn. Arkansas is even shorter, so they're favored by 5 points over Vermont. That's it. So to have 79% of the people say Arkansas will beat Vermont feels a little high to me, and I actually have that point spread a tad lower, although Arkansas is certainly more athletic than Vermont. Bama will play the winner of Rutgers Notre Dame, who I expect to be Notre Dame, and Bama Notre Dame matchup under 2 possessions for me as well. Another point here, Davidson and Michigan State. I have Davidson personally favored by a few points. So I give them about, I think it's a 53% chance of winning that game. And only 39% of the field is. So there's a clear leverage spot. I'm saying, hey, this is greater than 50% that Davidson moves on, yet 61% of the field are taking Michigan State. So if Davidson wins, you now have an advantage over 61% of the entrants in your pool, assuming the percentages hold. Duke, CS Fullerton, point spread around 17. I do think Duke will win. I think Duke is extremely vulnerable, but not in that spot. We'll move down to the East. I'll go pretty quickly here. Baylor, again, 1s and 16s, not the place to take a shot, even in, the big ESPN field. North Carolina, I'm in line with that. I have North Carolina by about 5 points. St. Mary's will get the winner of Wyoming and Indiana. I expect that to be Indiana, but should be a pretty close game there. And I have St. Mary's by 5 to 7, regardless of who advances there. UCLA and Akron is kind of tricky. I have this around 10 points, but it should be a slower pace game. And Akron shoots a high percentage of threes. So when you have a slow pace game, you are reducing the amount of possessions that each team gets. And when you have a high 3-point rate on either team, you're certainly increasing the variance of that game. So if we get down to 64 possessions and Akron shoots above average, that's kind of how these things can go sideways. So I do think UCLA will win, but 91% seems a bit high. Not the spot I would attack, though. Texas, Virginia Tech. This is tricky because I do like Virginia Tech. I have Virginia Tech by 3, which would put that around, I don't know, like 56, 57% chance. So no leverage there. But if that gets much higher, it's getting into kind of danger zone for Virginia Tech. Yale and Purdue. Purdue has issues defensively. I don't believe Yale is a team that can exploit those, but we will find opportunities to bet against Purdue later on. Murray State, San Francisco. This is a significant leverage spot. So I have San Francisco favored by 3.5 points. KenPom has San Francisco favored by about 2. Bart Torvik, another analytics site, has San Francisco favored as well. Yet 70% of the people are on Murray State. Rightfully so. They're a great team. But certainly the field is overconfident here. Even if this was a coin flip, give me the 30% side to gain some leverage and earn some points over our opponents there. Kentucky and St. Peter's. St. Peter's plays super slow and has an elite defense, even when adjusting for opponent. Certainly don't think they can beat Kentucky, but kind of a gross game for Kentucky there. We'll make our way over to the South. Arizona will play the winner of Wright State and Bryant. Both teams can score. Arizona's point guard is hurt. Again, I don't think this is the year or any year that a 1 seed loses to a 16 seed, but these are competent 16 seeds in spots this year. Seton Hall, TCU. The public is undecided here, 51-49, and I am similar. I have that game super close, but do favor the TCU side. UAB and Houston. Houston is someone that I don't think you will find leverage on in the first round, either betting on them or against them. Like, I'm in line with market. UAB is a dangerous opponent. But if Houston advances, they play a style of ball that can really weather the storm when you don't play well. So when you rebound well, you can afford off shooting nights. When you defend well, you can afford off shooting nights. And some teams do not play like that. And that's what's made Houston pretty consistent in the NCAA tournament in recent years. Illinois, Chattanooga. Chattanooga is probably a matchup problem for some teams, but I don't believe Illinois. However, Houston would pose a bigger problem to Illinois there. Michigan, Colorado State, some travel issues for Colorado State. I did have Michigan as a slight favorite. I'm kind of in line with the public here, but Colorado State hasn't even flown out of Colorado yet as of tonight. So they're supposed to play the first game of the tournament on Thursday. And they kind of got some travel issues. So something to watch for there. We kind of saw that with Virginia last year against Ohio. Tennessee, Longwood, I don't anticipate any problems there, although Longwood is a pretty good rebounding team. Loyola Chicago, I have favored over Ohio State, so that's a clear leverage spot for me in the opening round. While I do like Delaware to cover, I do not think they're beating Villanova. And we'll move on to Kansas and Texas Southern versus the Texas A&M Corpus Christi winner. Again, just advance your 1 seeds at least through the first round. Get them through that round of 64. San Diego State I have as a slight favorite. Creighton's point guard is injured, but that game is pretty close. I do have Iowa comfortable here. Richmond's transition defense is pretty weak, and this is a good spot for Iowa based on that. Another clear leverage spot here, Providence and South Dakota State. So the point spread on this, even though it's a 4 seed versus a 13 seed, is currently 2. I have Providence by about a half point. So I consider this game to be pretty much a toss-up. So to gain leverage on 72% of the field in the event South Dakota State wins, this is the spot that I would personally choose to take the 13 seed as the underdog win there. Iowa State, LSU. I have LSU by about 6, so I'm a little above market there and don't see issues for LSU moving on, although they did just fire their head coach for cheating a few days ago. Colgate, Wisconsin. Tricky one here. Wisconsin's playing close to home, so it will be kind of a pseudo home game for them. But I have them favored by about 5 here, and the point spread's around 7. So 90% is a little high. Over the year, based on quality of shots taken, Colgate is pretty elite at creating shots, taking good shots, and making shots. And Wisconsin has been the beneficiary of some lucky results just based on the shots taken. Not a Wisconsin hater, just saying it's kind of how this thing works. I have Miami as a slight favorite. Both these teams are overvalued, and I would not have them going on. Auburn, Jacksonville State, again 15-2. I don't think Auburn has any struggles here. So let's recap this because that's a lot of information. So I will slow down a bit at this point and kind of tell you where and why I think we have some leverage in the first round. So I break this into 2 categories, low-risk decisions and high-risk decisions. Low-risk decisions would apply to any pool. If you're in a pool of 10 people, I think these are sound decisions. High-risk decisions would be, I would only deploy a strategy like this, and probably not all of them unless I'm in an extremely large pool with hundreds of thousands or millions of people. So my low-risk decisions, I would choose San Francisco over Murray State. I give San Francisco a 57% chance of winning, and only 28% of your opponents are choosing San Francisco, so that is no-brainer leverage for me. I do need you to understand what probability means. 55% means if these teams play 20 times, you'll win 11, you'll lose 9. So when you see 56%, it's like, oh yeah, that's a done deal. They'll win, they'll move on. Hey, they'll win 11, they'll lose 9. But again, there's still leverage over your opponents here. Loyola, I have favored 57.5, and less than that are taking Loyola Chicago. More are backing Ohio State. Davidson, I think this number will climb 2. I have 52% of the time Davidson winning, and the field is taking Davidson only 37% of the time. And similar story with Miami and USC. Now let's get to another reason I chose these as low risk is I give all of them a greater than 50% chance of winning. So when factoring in the risk and like, what's this decision doing? Is it likely? Not just does it have leverage, but is it likely? I feel it is. So the only one I have lower than 50% is South Dakota State over Providence, and here's why. So I give this coin or this game basically a coin flip, and less than a quarter of your opponents will choose this path. Here's why I like it. I don't think either fares well in the next round against what I expect to be Iowa. Providence struggles in this matchup due to their transition defense, and Providence would struggle in their next matchup due to their transition defense. So if your opponent picked Providence to win this game and you had the other side and you lost and they won, if they had Providence advancing, I don't think you're going to get hurt by that. Where you want to avoid, picking against teams that could win 1, 2, 3, or 4 games. That's when your bracket really gets blown up. So I think either team here is winning this game only and not the next, and that's why I'm fine considering that a low-risk decision. Some higher-risk decisions. Vermont over Arkansas. The reason I consider this higher risk, even though I view it as close to 50% chance of happening and immense leverage over the competition, is Arkansas does have a ceiling where they could win against UConn. They could compete against Gonzaga. So if you're wrong on this one, it can haunt you for multiple rounds. Similar story with Rutgers, Notre Dame winner over Alabama. Alabama certainly has a ceiling. They shoot three-pointers at a high rate, increasing the variance of their outcomes. And if they're hot, they can beat pretty much anyone. Colgate over Wisconsin. I don't fear Wisconsin burning your bracket. Like if you lost this game because Wisconsin won, I don't think Wisconsin's going to advance far. But it's a pseudo home game, and it's a tad thin. So let's get to the next round. So this will be the round of 32. We're kind of focusing here. When do you have your one seeds bail out? Who are the dark horses, so to speak? And you can kind of see what the competition is doing here. Again, 95% confidence for Gonzaga. Here's the benefit that the one seeds have over everyone else. They don't have much of a challenge. They're dealing with these 20 to 25 point spreads in the opening round, so there's just very little risk of them losing. Now Memphis has to deal with a close game here. So if both teams advance, Memphis can come within 7, 8 points of Gonzaga. But it's getting there is the issue. There's this cumulative effect that really gets to be kind of troublesome. Gonzaga has struggled with physical bigs this year. Memphis certainly has physical bigs. I don't know if this is the team to take down Gonzaga, and I don't know if this is the spot to exit Gonzaga. I certainly will not recommend having Gonzaga be your champion, but this feels a bit thin at this stage of the game. UConn and Arkansas, again, a type of matchup that if they matched up with Gonzaga, they can deal with them in transition. They have big bigs. Jalen Williams for Arkansas, Sinago for UConn. So there's risk in Gonzaga's region that I think a lot of people are not properly assessing. Texas Tech, I had cruising in the first round, and then they would get Bama or the winner of the play-in game. And Bama's a high variance team, but I do have Texas Tech comfortably there. Now, I have Davidson instead of Michigan State here, and I do think there are paths to Davidson beating Duke. I'm not going to deploy that strategy, but I think there are paths to that happening. They're similar to Virginia Tech. They run a lot of motion, and Duke has really struggled to guard in space, particularly in the last 6 weeks. Baylor, North Carolina. I don't have much of an angle here, meaning I'm in line with the market if both teams got here. It's certainly easier for Baylor to get here. Now here, I think this is too much. I do respect UCLA. I think they are the better team, but a 73-27 split is too strong for me and certainly leverage on the St. Mary's side. Virginia Tech, this is all if they get past Texas. I actually like their odds of beating Purdue better than beating Texas, just for the type of offense they run. They run a lot of ball screens. They will pull Purdue's bigs away from the basket and get them kind of moving and not just back to the basket. And Purdue certainly has had trouble with that this year. And Virginia Tech is definitely a team that can exploit that. However, their first game's tight. It's like a 1-point spread. So I don't know. Wish we could just reseed or repick our brackets after the first round, because if Virginia Tech made it, I do like them over Purdue here. Now, I have San Francisco going up against Kentucky, and I certainly fear Kentucky, and I'm not interested in betting against Kentucky's ceiling. I mentioned that I thought USC and Miami were both kind of fraudulent, so Auburn is pretty safe. They're pretty protected down here as the 2 seed. Wisconsin, I mentioned some slight risk in the first game. I would not be surprised if Colgate beat them, and I did not have LSU with much troubles with Iowa State. So cumulatively, this is a big spot for LSU to advance because I think they have an easier job getting out of the first round. And if these teams matched up, I still prefer LSU. I think Iowa actually has a tougher time with South Dakota State here, just in an up and down game and defending South Dakota State's offense. It certainly would be like 95-90 or something like that. Don't know if Providence or South Dakota State will come out of there, but in either case, I think it's significant advantages for Iowa if it's Providence, and I'm not scared of the South Dakota State matchup. San Diego State, Kansas. San Diego State certainly can drag a game out. They can really slow it down. They defend well. I don't know if they can score enough against Kansas to make an impact there. But yeah, Kansas is not necessarily safe, but I don't think that's the spot itself. I don't think Ohio State will be here. I think Loyola Chicago will be here, and I think it'll be a very slow game. And Loyola Chicago can certainly compete in that game. Tennessee, I don't have experiencing too many problems. Houston, if they avoid the scare with UAB, I think match up nicely against Illinois. Even though Houston has had so many injuries this year, they keep performing well. And I don't know, TCU's got a bit of a ceiling after beating Kansas twice down the stretch. Kansas and Arizona don't exactly profile the same, but certainly a dangerous team there, as is Seton Hall if their point guard is healthy. So leverage spots here. I think the big one is LSU. I don't give Wisconsin a whole lot of credit, and to have 76% of the people advancing Wisconsin to the Sweet 16 is just too high for me. So I give LSU a 53% chance of beating Iowa State and Wisconsin or Colgate. And only 19% of the field was advancing LSU. So I think that's a clear leverage spot. And then Houston was another leverage spot because the majority of people are taking Illinois here. I do think Houston has a little more trouble in their first round than Illinois likely does, although it's about the same. And then Virginia Tech, again, if I knew Virginia Tech was beating Texas, I'd be feeling pretty good about that matchup with likely Purdue. And only 19% of the field have Virginia Tech going to the Sweet 16. So now let's get into the actual Sweet 16 and who would move on to the Elite Eight. So if Gonzaga is here, they would play Arkansas or UConn. I have that pretty close. I like UConn's path to get here as easier than Arkansas's, so I give a slight edge to UConn being here. But, man, whoever Gonzaga plays, I mean, they're going to be favored by at least 6 and likely 10 for the majority of the first 3 to 4 rounds. So some issues there just with math for me. Texas Tech, if Duke got by whoever they played here, who I'm expecting to be Davidson, I have no issues with Texas Tech beating Duke, while the majority of people favor Duke there. Another Sweet 16 game, Baylor and UCLA. To me, this comes down to the path. So Baylor having to get by Norfolk State is very little risk, not much risk with North Carolina, where UCLA had to avoid the three-point shooting slow game of Akron, the slow game of St. Mary's, and that's a tough matchup. So while it may not be Baylor advancing here, I think it's tough to choose any of these teams with any confidence, and that's what makes those 1 seeds so attractive. I do not think Purdue will be here, and I think Kentucky matches up far better with, anyone from that sector there. I expect LSU and Auburn to be here. They've played in the SEC this year, and I don't know, it's pretty much a toss-up. So 66% favoring Auburn feels a little bit high. Kansas and Iowa, that's going to be the game. I think based on recent play, and I'm not saying that as a narrative, I'm literally saying as adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency, Iowa is top 5 since like February 1st in almost all analytic sites. But Kansas certainly is up there as well. And yeah, that would be a tough one. I have Kansas as a slight favorite, but I do think there's value in Iowa there. I prefer Tennessee here, and I prefer Arizona, but I fear Houston. I'll get to that in just a second. So let's look at leverage spots for the Sweet 16. Texas Tech, 32% of people have Texas Tech getting out of the Sweet 16 into the Elite 8, and I give them over a 50% chance of doing that. So to me, that is something I will be penciling in my brackets. Iowa, Kansas, man, that's a key decision point, and I'll likely just deploy different strategies depending on what size of pool I'm in. But I give Iowa close to 50% chance, mainly because I don't think they had issues up to that point. When you talk Sweet 16 games, it's not just who are they playing right now, it's who did they play to get there. And it's possible that Iowa plays Seton Hall or TCU here. And I don't know. I liked Iowa's first round matchup, and I don't see a whole lot of risk with the second round. Now, LSU, now we're getting some immense leverage. So LSU getting out of the Sweet 16, they would have to beat Auburn. I give LSU a 29% chance of getting out of the Sweet 16, mainly because I don't think they had many problems with Iowa State. And then Wisconsin or Colgate, I think, is a decent matchup for them as well. So it ultimately comes down to them versus Auburn, and only 6% of the people think that that could happen. So give me 29%. So now we're getting into like nitty-gritty stuff that there's so many contingencies happening. So really what I would stress here is the amount of people picking Gonzaga is just too high. So I'll cut right to that right now. 59% of people have Gonzaga going to the Final Four. So if Gonzaga could lose to Texas Tech, if Gonzaga could lose to Arkansas or UConn, if Gonzaga could lose to Memphis or Boise State, again, all these teams have physical bigs, which have given Gonzaga problems. All these teams force turnovers, which have given Gonzaga's guards problems. You've got immense leverage over the field. It certainly doesn't feel good to be like, yeah, I don't have Gonzaga in my Final Four, but we're talking leverage, and we're not trying to finish in, the top 25th percent of the pool. We're trying to win the dang thing. And then Houston. I think Houston has a tough path to get here, but 5% is just too low for a proven tournament coach, a style that is conducive to winning even when you don't play well, you win ugly. So I think that is significant as well. And this kind of carries into the Final Four. So my final thoughts are just don't have Gonzaga win your championship. If you want to have them in the Final Four, that's okay. You're with 60% of the people. Don't have them win. If they win, they win. But that is that's tricky. I mean, you and everyone having Gonzaga would mean you'd have to run pure in all other matchups. So if you're going to have Gonzaga, I would recommend at least 2 other non-1 or 2 seeds in your Final Four. And then if you choose to not have Gonzaga there, then you could be a little less contrarian and a little more along lines with probabilities. Maybe you have Baylor in there. Maybe you have Arizona in there. Maybe you have Kansas in there. But if you have Gonzaga there, you're going to have to get weird to win a pool of any size. So overall, that's kind of my strategy. I think the keys are in the opening rounds. Take your shots on not knocking out a heavyweight, but take your shots on these 50-50 balls that people are just overconfident in, like, oh, yeah, that's the better team. And you see these big variances of like 70% picking Team A when it's more of like a 50-50 game. So hopefully you have found some key leverage spots. If you're new here, tune in tomorrow because we will go game by game through the entire Thursday NCAA tournament and give against the spread picks and get ready to have a march. This is Cutting Down the Nets.